Once again, welcome to another CoreNet Plugged In. We took the week off last week, but this is a continuation of our Plugged In series that has been going on since the COVID shutdown. I can see some of us, myself included, are finally starting to get back to the office. So that's a good sign, but this virtual series is going to continue. We have it planned at least through the summer. The CoreNet chapter, as some of you may know, we aren't doing any more in-person events, at least until after Labor Day at the earliest. So we encourage your participation in these platforms. And for those, again, that don't know, this particular time slot, the Wednesday afternoon, is our Plugged In series, which is meant to be the most robust deep dive of subject matter with the subject matter experts. And we'll have some housekeeping to that effect, which I'll pass off to Laura Patel, who is with our Programming Outreach Committee, which manages a lot of the content. So without further ado, I'll give it to Laura to go over some housekeeping and introduce our panelists. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Tommy. So I know most of you looking around at all your smiling faces, but for those of you I haven't met, my name is Laura Patel, and I'm the Director of Strategic Accounts at Density. We are a proprietary sensor and occupancy analytics platform that leverages artificial intelligence to anonymously and in real time monitor human beings and how we use space. We currently support clients in overseeing about 100 million square feet of real estate distributed across 30 countries. And I happen to be lucky enough to be working with a couple of the companies that you are going to hear from today. Tommy mentioned I'm also the vice chair of CoreNet New York's Programming and Outreach Committee. And in that capacity, I echo Tommy's sentiments in thanking all of you for coming to the event today and exploring crisis as a catalyst. And we're going to dive into really how COVID-19 is hopefully going to, as a silver lining, play a really important role in helping to further real estate innovation. So quick housekeeping item, Tommy sort of alluded to there. We, unlike many other webinars that you may have attended, we've chosen to go with a standard Zoom format instead of a webinar format in order to encourage audience participation. And with that in mind, we don't have full control over your audio and video. You won't be muted when you join. So we'd ask that everyone keep your audio and video as well switched off during the presentation portion, and just use the chat function to ask questions and also engage with each other. You can either send public or private messages, and we'll keep an eye on those as we go through the panel, collecting any questions that you pose, which we'll revisit at about 1:45 and call on some individuals to participate in the live Q&A. So with that, let's kick things off. You aren't here to listen to me. You registered for this event to hear from our esteemed panel. So I'm going to give each of them a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. And Kathy, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Peter, Nick, and we'll wrap things up with Cynthia.
Okay, thank you. And just now I see a blower outside with our with our backyard work, so I apologize for that. But thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Winkler. I'm a head of the real estate management for the Americas region at Novartis, or should I say at home, representing Novartis right now. Been home for 3 months, so we have a few more, I think 1 more month to go, but we're going to be phasing all of our occupancy in slowly. Prior to Novartis, where I've been 5 years now, I was with Prudential for many, many years, and where I managed all aspects of corporate real estate. Here at Novartis, I manage about 15 to 16 million square feet of space, about 250 locations. That does not include any of the recent acquisitions, which we're integrating currently. And our team supports the key company objectives, such as culture transformation. We have a relatively new CEO, very inspiring, and he's truly committed to changing the culture of Novartis. So we are definitely supporting that effort through workplace innovation. We want to be leaders in data and digital and operational excellence, as well as giving back to the community and sustainability. So to that end, we certainly are focused on reducing our portfolio.
Let me go in a place that's
and we will hopefully not just reduce our costs, but our carbon footprint as a result. Thank you.
Peter, you're muted.
And I can't get this right. Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome. It was really fun watching you
starting off
animatedly.
perfectly. So my name is Peter Van Emberg. I finally have this figured out, and I have the pleasure of serving as the end user corporate real estate leader for really running real estate for a real estate company. So I am in charge of CBRE's corporate office footprint around the world, representing about 525 offices, about 7 million square feet. And so under my purview, I have responsibility for the site selection, the portfolio and workplace strategy, the project management, the construction, the design, build out, operations of our footprint for all of our lines of businesses around the world. I'm so happy to be joining you all and serving on this panel today. I'm the former past president of the Mid-Atlantic chapter, although I grew up outside of New York City, so that's where my heart is, but I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. Although typically I say I'm based on a plane, the last couple months certainly been hunkered down at home like everyone else and eager to return back to our offices. So thanks for having me, Laura.
Thanks, Peter. Nick, do you want to one-up Peter?
I don't think it's possible. But hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Currently, I am Senior Vice President in charge of Hudson Yards for Related. I joined the company actually about 5 months ago. So the first 2 months was spent understanding the real estate at Hudson Yards, which totals about 15 million square feet, a combination of Class A office properties, the shops, residential, the vessel, and a few other things. And then the last 3 months, of course, learning how to work in the environment amidst a pandemic. Prior to joining Related, I spent approximately 18 years at JLL on the corporate real estate side and property management. More recently, I handled the Goldman Sachs account and the global headquarters and regional offices in Asia and in the Northeast. Thank you.
Oh, did we lose Cynthia?
Hi, can you?
Oh, there you are.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thanks for having me. I'm Cynthia Lindberg, Executive Director of Design, Construction, and Facilities for Ogilvy in North America. And as an architect, I'm very interested in workplace design. We have a really strong culture of open collaboration, and we have offices all across the United States and Canada and globally, but my reach is just for the North American portion. We have about 500,000 square feet in New York City. And I also work closely with WPP on designs for our campus co-locations. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. So we're here today to talk about what's coming next, which will be kind of the meat of our discussion. But before we do, we're going to set the stage by talking a little bit very briefly about how we got here and what here really looks like. And to that end, Kathy, I'm going to actually bring you in first. If we can go way back, let's talk about the last 10 years, which have been widely regarded as a period of significant change and disruption in the real estate industry. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what innovations and evolutions did you experience as an organization at Novartis over those last 10 years that actually helped to prepare you to adapt really quickly and seamlessly in response to the recent pandemic?
So 10 years in my world is not that far back, but yes, thank you. Especially with my work at Prudential for many, many years, as I mentioned before. We have been at this since the mid-90s that I could remember. And that's a long, long time ago where we really try to get traction on workplace strategies, alternative workplace strategies, mobile workers, unassigned desks, you name it. And we tried really hard, but it just wasn't getting any traction. In the past 10 years, 5 of which were at Novartis, 5 still at Prudential, I started seeing a little bit of introduction of open plan, understanding a little bit better how people collaborate, and how to really design workplace, not just to open up the spaces and put everybody into, you know, these open desks, but rather provide areas for people to be able to function based on whatever work you do, right? So if you have to have heads down type of work, you need a very secluded and private space. So we would provide that. If you needed make a phone call, a private phone call, we'd provide phone booths, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these type of concepts. I think in the past it was really a little bit more difficult to do because the technology hasn't been there as we have it today. But in the past 5 years at Novartis, when I first got there, I was quite surprised how behind the pharmaceutical industry was from financial services industries. I mean, we had private offices everywhere, and it was really, really behind the times. But as soon as I arrived, and shortly after, we got new CEO who was really inspired by changing the culture and knew that in order to do that, the workplace will be the enabler to do that, to help one of the enablers. So we immediately started opening up our designs and providing open space, focusing on the mobile worker, providing the technology they need, and then at the end of the day, focusing on the flexibility for working from home as well as in the office or anywhere else where you need to get your work done in the best possible manner. That was a couple of years into my last 5 years, and then we realized that our utilization of the assigned desks that we had provided, even the open area, was really low. I mean, we started measuring and realized, oh my gosh, nobody's really here most of the time. So we began a whole new concept of activity-based work, and we started doing all of our new projects based on about conservative 75% utilization, although we saw anywhere between 40 and 60% utilization. We're sort of starting slowly and beginning to have people not have assigned desks, provide them all different types of environments where they could do their work, and really force the concept of working from home as one of the options for the flexibility that people need to get their work done. Obviously, the technology was right along with us to provide whatever systems we needed to help us do all that. So I think those past few years, in my mind, especially at Novartis, has really prepared us for this. And actually, we were rolling out Microsoft Teams. The plan was in the next 6 months, we were going to transition from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. And the minute we got locked down, they rolled out Microsoft Teams immediately, and now we're on that platform and using that throughout the company globally, and it's been really successful.
And Laura, I can jump in. I mean, what Kathy's talking about is very similar to our journey at CBRE in terms of some of the workplace innovations and evolutions that we've seen over the past 7 years and how it's prepared us for dealing with this pandemic. So for us, we launched the CBRE Workplace 360 program 7 years ago. That was really a transformative game changer for our company. We really threw out the old workplace standard, and so as every office lease came up for renewal, we've embraced this new workplace standard that's completely 100% free address, unassigned, clean desk workplace environment, really centered around employee choice and mobility. We have a heavy investment in the technology enablement and the amenitization of the workplace into what has really become a community builder and a hallmark of our culture for our companies, for those that have adopted. We've rolled out about 42 or 43 in the Americas and about 82 and 83 worldwide. So really, we transitioned from about 3 space types to where you used to be able to get work done, and that was in your office or a cubicle or a conference room, to now we have 14 places that you can get work done within the workplace. And about, still there's so much of an aspect of choice and where the work gets done. About 30 to 40% of our office layout is enclosed, the rest of it more open plan, not a cookie cutter, not a one-size-all-fits approach at all. But what we found is that over 90% of our professionals would not go back to the old way of working. And that's been consistent across all the projects we've rolled out. And in fact, we've also found our professionals, a lot of our brokers, to be even more productive, more financially successful in one of our 82 workplace 360 models around the world. I mean, that's just tremendous in terms of the transformative effect that it's had for our company. So in this work anywhere, anytime world, we've realized that there's a vital role for place, and one that really supports the professional mobility while enabling ideas to grow and a culture of collaboration to form. So how has this really prepared us for the pandemic? Well, aside from the mobility tools and our investment in technology, the whole unassigned clean desk policy has continued to provide our employees with a choice of where work gets done when they do come back to the workplace. Additionally, it'll be a lot easier to sanitize and clean the desk when you're not really trying to clean or navigate around the personal effects or the picture of the cat on the desk. And so it's also really easy to keep these teams together, because when we were seeing in some of our traditional office layouts, which we still have a number of them around the country, including New York, it's hard to keep the teams together when you're trying to socially distance. So you're having to stagger and develop the reentry staggered work team plan around trying to achieve this 40% occupancy or lower for our offices. And we're having to break up the teams that are there in an assigned workplace environment, whereas opposed to our unassigned, we can be really strategic and deliberate around keeping that social distancing and keeping the cohesion of teams together when they return. Because after all, people, I think, are really anxious to come back to the workplace safely, but in a manner that they can still collaborate and connect with their teams.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in a little bit. I think that on the operational standpoint, everything that Kathy and Peter mentioned, in order to support those various strategies as they've been evolving. So at Hudson Yards, we have approximately 20,000 occupants that ideally come to work every day. And I think if you look at the last 10 years, we've had a lot of lessons learned as to how to respond and react to pandemics, whether it's H1N1 or MRSA. So we have a lot of procedures that have already been baked, but the technology that's available to us on the communication front, when you think about WebEx and Zoom and Teams and all the other stuff that's out there, you know, even as recently as 5 years ago, it'd be very difficult to suddenly turn off being in the office and go into this mobile workplace and work from home and be able to connect the way we're doing right now. The fact that there's all these pictures on my screen of active video wouldn't have happened, 5 years ago. I couldn't even get my Netflix to work right then. But then when you look at technology over the last few years, when we're building space or trying to figure out, what the right innovative tools are out there, you would look at frictionless technology, whether it's hands-free dispensers or destination dispatched elevator systems or systems where you can call the elevator from your phone. There was a point those were nice to have technologies, and now they've transitioned into must-haves. And it's, for me personally, it's exciting at Hudson Yards because a lot of that tech is already, been in place, or it's something that, is really a short hop into implementation. But between having the technology available that allows you to switch gears right away to an entirely work from home situation, and to make sure that all of our tenants and our corporate offices are taken care of and our people feel safe when they decide to come back to work, and making sure that we've leveraged all the resources that we have to give them the opportunity to work, be successful, and feel safe at the office.
Awesome. So that's a good, I think, transition point. And Peter, I'd love to hear from you first on this topic. How, I think, still thinking back a little bit with the lens of the last few years, but bringing us into the present, how has the pandemic changed your C-suite's perspective on the role of the real estate team and also just real estate as an asset? And specifically, how has that perhaps increased the appetite for innovation?
Sure. Well, I think it's been no surprise to anyone on this call that, the role of the CRE and the function of the corporate real estate organization has really evolved tremendously over the last couple of years into being much more of a strategic partner and really aligning into more of the corporate strategy. And I think as we're seeing, as probably a lot of my colleagues will agree, especially in this pandemic response, first the response and then the planning to reopen and all these activities, unforeseen activities we see ourselves in today, we're seeing that the CRE is really playing a strategic role in helping respond to the outbreak, working closely with the other corporate functions, really ensuring employee health and safety, but while still supporting the business continuity efforts through remote working and the return to work plans. And that's a really key role that, I mean, I think the corporate real estate function is really under the spotlight in a good way. Now, to your point around innovation, I think we're seeing two things. There's the innovation part and there's still the community builder. So we're seeing that, at least personally, I'm seeing the corporate real estate is being expected to help lead with innovation post-COVID. So in what way? So I'm seeing it personally in just new technologies that will make experience at work easier and safer, better access, HVAC, space utilization technologies that help us operate in a safe and monitored environment, and having access to that real-time data to track occupancy levels and really make sure we're staying true to our playbook that we're putting out there. We're also seeing the introduction of mobile apps around assisting building owners like Nick, as well as the occupants, really try to help partner together and support a healthy workplace, such as reentry health and health and temperature readiness checks, or the staggered reentry plans, employee communications, and occupancy tracking. So we're just seeing a whole explosion of innovation taking place and a spotlight on CRE. And the last thing I'll say is I think that the C-suite is also going to reaffirm its position that the corporate real estate organization can take a leading role in employee attraction retention, and that idea of being a community builder. Really our ability to create inspiring workplaces for people to reconnect and communities to form in the spontaneity of collaborative spaces.
Yeah, and if I may, Laura, I have to definitely agree with Pierre on a lot of the things he said about CRE being a little bit more visible now in the C-suite. One of the things that I've even heard recently is that a lot of our C-suite executives were not really bought into the work from home concept at all. And now they're saying, oh my God, it works. It's fantastic. Well, let's just do this all the time. Now, at the same time, we also are seeing that the innovation that comes with these workplace strategies is not only work from home. Obviously, this kind of broke the barrier of people, especially in management, not knowing how to manage people virtually. HR is putting in new processes and how to measure performance. All of these things are happening because of the pandemic. And somebody recently told me, let's not waste a good crisis, right? Let's really pick up where we have the opportunity and the momentum now to really innovate and begin to see how we're going to work in the future. But we have to also be very careful that we don't design and plan for things that are going to be lasting 5 to 10 years based on today's situation, right? So we really need to understand how are we going to work in the future. And I don't think anybody really has the answer yet, but I think we have to be careful and create flexibility and really develop opportunities for people to be able to work where they're most productive. And I think that really has resonated with our C-suite and our management teams, even the most skeptical ones. So I feel good about that. The other thing that I've been hearing, and from our CEO, he's very focused on what we call distributed work. And one of the things that I think is going to come out of this is that we're going to realize that we could get talent, we could attract talent not only in the locations where your physical space is, but also all over the world, because you could connect with those people and have the best possible talent no matter where you are, and have that person hired for a position that fits that that talent. So I think a lot of incredible, innovative things are evolving from this crisis. As much as I hate to say that, I mean, it's obviously a horrible thing, but at the same time, in our industry, I really see a very positive outcome.
I would agree with that. I think that this pandemic has just maybe accelerated where we were all going anyway. the whole idea of working from home and teams finding innovative ways to collaborate. It's all there, but and I know we'll still need the offices when this is all said and done. We might just change the way we use them, but I agree. I think it's been a learning curve for all of us.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Over the years, there was a point where, the CRE group would be perceived as basically managers of expenses and a necessary evil. And if we're doing our job really well, no one actually knows we're doing it. Over the last several years, as a large focus has been on retaining talent, not only just securing top talent as you compete for a great workplace environment, that had already started to, I think, get the attention of the C-suite. And I think now more than ever, everything about our ability to keep businesses operating and running rests on CRE's ability to respond, react, and adapt to what's going on. So I think clearly there's a much bigger seat at the table for corporate real estate than ever was before.
So Nick,
Cynthia,
one thing I think if you could, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Laura,
you go ahead, Peter, that's okay.
I wanted, Nick, I mean, you're doing a lot of really smart things around the innovation of technology as it relates to Hudson Yards and the entry experience. And I know there's been some questions coming across the chat, but can you talk just some of the specific innovations and technologies you're bringing to Hudson Yards? Sure.
Yeah, so when in direct response to COVID, for example, we're trying to leverage every bit of technology that makes sense. As you can imagine, we're inundated with all kinds of products and material. But starting out with this particular process, there's certain schools of thought around thermal scanning. We're actually doing it in our lobbies as people come into the buildings. We've been communicating, first and foremost, it was really about reaching out to every one of our tenants, and that's at literally every tenant, and understanding what their priorities were. And they took great comfort, frankly, in knowing that we're being proactive about taking temperatures in the lobby. Even though everyone knows most people are asymptomatic, they didn't want to have to really address that issue with each one of their employees. And we're taking a process where it's agnostic. If you come into the building, you need to wear a mask, you need to subject yourself to getting a temperature screen, but we don't know who you are. It's up to you who you want to speak to about it. Signage, we have a very comprehensive signage program as far as trying to, give people guidance as to how to socially distance. But in addition to that, we ramped up our janitorial protocols. I think base building janitorial services has to change. To a higher standard and leveraging technology on that side as well, and sharing that information with all of our tenants. All of our sudden, so when this thing initially broke out, I'm scrambling to get Pure Up, and I felt like a drug dealer. And then and then I'm competing with the government. And the fact is, though, that all of a sudden, all of my tenants became my competition once the government settled down, because as the tenants are thinking about coming back to work, they've now become my competition. And so we partner with all of them to offer them guidance operationally. We talked about like I said, the thermal scanning process, the signage process, the janitorial process, but it's also about educating everybody. We also partnered with Mount Sinai to make sure that what we're doing is in conjunction with CDC and good and best practices as well. And generally speaking, we're very proactive on the tech, just in general. I mentioned earlier about elevator technology. So, with Otis, we partnered up with them, and in one of our buildings, it's basically you come in, and if you're one of our tenants, your information is on your phone. It queues you up for an elevator as you come into the building. Our turnstiles, for the most part, are frictionless, which means you don't touch them, you just pass your hand over them. So in that regard, we're always trying to stay on our front foot and anticipating what people are looking for. In this process, for us, we've been fortunate because we've got a huge team and we're very collaborative. It's not just with the operations group. We speak to our construction people as we're building buildings to understand what they're looking at, and they listen to what we're looking at. So we try to improve our product. We have a robust customer experience side. So everything ties into each other. Ultimately, from a customer service level, and bonded with our operations group.
So just to kind of, I think, build off of that and transition. So Kathy, you mentioned something that I want to spend a little bit more time on, which was talking about kind of remote working. And Cynthia, I'd love to bring you in on this discussion. It sounds from some of your and my past conversations like Ogilvy has always taken a very progressive stance insofar as your real estate strategy is concerned and your approach to building workplace. For example, you once mentioned to me that you went from 100% private office to 100% open plan back in 2009, which is, 5 years at a minimum, if not a decade, before a lot of companies really started to make these progressive pushes towards completely open concept. So I'm curious to get your perspective. There's been a rush, whether or not it's just for media buzz, will kind of remain to be seen, of organizations that are talking about implementing permanent work from home policies. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that approach and some of the potential positive aspects from a workplace management, but also construction and design standpoint, and then also obviously some of the inherent risks.
Right, that's a very good point. I think that, again, working from home has been something that we've had at Ogilvy for a while now, and I think we've all proven that it can be done. And I definitely see a place for it in the future, especially as we go back in sort of limited capacity, and just the whole nature of work and how it needs to be flexible. And that was a mandate for our design concepts over 10 years ago now. So I think it'll be definitely something that we'll see continuing on. And it's also, it crosses all generations, right? We have, people in their later years in the workforce, and we have people with kids at home. So it addresses a variety of needs. And I think it'll be something that will be with us from now on. I mean, we've proven it can work. And I think it's just a matter of, when we all come back, how we'll work that in. But I imagine that it'll be a part of the equation going forward.
Yeah, and Laura, I'm a little biased here, but our core business is real estate. So I think there is always going to be a place for real estate, at least for my own sake and long-term career at CBRE. However, I agree with what Cynthia is saying, but I think there is a certain buzz out there that I think is just probably histrionic, where they're saying, permanent work from home. I just don't see how you can develop and foster a culture and build upon that sense of community with a 100% remote workforce. I think, one of the things that's really inspired me about taking this role within CBRE a year ago, I've been with CBRE almost 9 years, but relatively new to this role, was the fact that, we're creating kind of like a FOMO workplace. And there's a sense of a fear of missing out if you're not coming to work and collaborating and taking advantage of the good coffee and the collaboration with peers. And I think there's still going to be a need and a place for that. While I think one of the good benefits that can come out of this pandemic is hopefully more employers will embrace flexibility and allowing their employees to have some choice in working, where and whenever work needs to get done.
Thanks for jumping in and clarifying that, Peter. I certainly didn't mean that we would have a permanent working from home solution across the board.
You weren't saying that, Cynthia. I was just building on it.
But no, I mean, Ogilvy especially, we're a creative agency. That's how we kick around ideas. That's how we work. We like coming in. It's part of our culture. I don't see the office ever going away. If anything, this whole working from home, I think, has proven to everyone that we miss each other. We miss going in the office. We miss bumping into each other. We miss just people. So I think, if anything, the office will be more important than ever before as a place to go to collaborate. Maybe you'll work from home one day a week or one day a month, but I think this has proven that we all really do love our offices.
Yeah, I think working from home and you still need a balance, because I know everybody I'm talking to, myself included, I don't think I've worked harder, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. It's one continuous WebEx conference call or Zoom, just to enhance your quality of life. I think working from work is a good thing, more than I think people appreciated before. But down the road. I think at the end of the day, now there's more flexibility for people to do a little bit of both.
Yeah, if I may just add to all of that, because certainly everybody has great points. I think we will work differently. I think this pandemic really forced us to think about other ways of working, but at the same time, sense of community, sense of belonging, sense of feeling like if you're, you know, this whole notion of out of sight, out of mind with the management, you know, might have some people fear that they're not going to progress in their careers or get promoted. I think all those are issues that we're all discussing at Novartis right now, and making sure that everybody feels safe, confident to come back. On the short term, hopefully there will be a vaccine, and working for Novartis right now, I feel very inspired of what the entire global scientific community is doing and collaborating to solve this problem. So on that front, I just wanted to point that out, that there will be a solution, maybe not this year, but soon. And we all will probably begin to go back to our old ways to some degree. And there will always be a need for office space. There's always going to be a need for coming together and feeling like you belong to a community and part of something bigger than just your job. So I truly believe that we will once again be together and have our events and socialize again. So I want to kind of put that a positive twist on this as well. But for now, the beauty of this is that I think a lot of management and leadership realizes that this is quite possible to work from home, therefore not be so afraid of having people work remotely, virtually, or wherever they need to get their job done, but given that option, given the flexibility, and I think that's really the key.
Well, no pressure, Kathy. You've got to create a vaccine now. So
we're working on
add that to your responsibility. No, but I think the one thing that I've noticed also in this whole work from home the last couple of months is that it's the proliferation of collaboration tools like Teams or Slack or other kind of remote communication tools. They're very tactical and transactional in nature. And the thing I miss the most, and I think that a lot of my colleagues would probably agree, is you can't replicate the spontaneity of the serendipitous encounters that take place in the workplace. You can't replicate that remotely, or at least it's just very, very hard to do that. And so that's one of the things that will be really a draw back to the physical workplace.
One of my friends put it really well, so I will blatantly plagiarize his thoughts. But he said that we've really stripped away all of the accoutrements associated with work and realized that without the workplace, it's really just emails, calls, and meetings, which we've irrefutably now proven through this mass unintentional social experiment can all be done with perfect levels of productivity. So moving forward, I think to kind of just with a tidy little bow, everything you've just said, workplace is really going to evolve to be a place of, placemaking, culture enhancement, and community building, which may not have been the initial goals for a lot of companies, but looking back again, not just over the last 10 years, but over the last several decades. So last question, then we're going to jump into a really quick lightning round, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A. So Nick, putting you in the hot seat here, but is there any thought around a flight to the suburbs from your perspective? I mean, real estate costs have been becoming increasingly untenable before the pandemic, and obviously the pandemic has proven that remote working is possible, like we've discussed throughout this panel, bringing about greater flexibility insofar as geographic locations of teams. So what does that combination mean for the future of organizations operating in larger metropolitan centers from your perspective? And even maybe not looking so much at the long term, but looking more at the next 5 years as well. Will we see a push to secondary markets or city suburbs like we did initially following 9/11?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think so. So having gone through the 9/11 piece, I can tell you that when you look back at our history, 9/11 is probably the biggest event that we thought would impact real estate, and of course it did. But just before 9/11, for example, downtown the financial district had just been revitalized. You know, people had been moving down there, the buildings had all been redone, everything was really 95% complete from being completely redeveloped. The 9/11 happened, and everybody thought nobody's ever coming back downtown. Everybody's going to get out of Dodge. Some people, you know, went down and got some great deals on some great apartments, some great buildings, and they thought downtown was done. So if you go down the financial district today, you wouldn't think that. And I think it's a similar kind of situation. I don't know that this pandemic, it impacted all of us in a very unique way. I don't know that a flight out of the city is going to be as a result of the pandemic. As people and companies consider alternatives, I think it's a natural progression from what was going on before COVID, and how their businesses become more, more global, and they leverage other markets depending on what drives their business. I think we're going to figure out how to work in this environment because, frankly, it's not as though there was some part of the country or marketplace where COVID didn't affect them. So it would be Westchester County, it could be out in Long Island and the burbs. So as a direct result of this, this experience, I don't know that's as big of a driver, and I don't know what, for example, someone like Peter might have a different perspective on it. But I think there's a point we go and we tend to, react and adjust so that we continue to operate initially. And then we acclimate to that environment, adjust further, and kind of reset and make good decisions going forward. But that's what I got.
I agree with Nick. I think, and it's not just because he's got a trophy world-class multi-use campus that's attracting world attention in the middle of the city, but I think there is still certainly a place, and at least I can speak to our tenant experience as the occupier, not the business advisor, but the occupier CBRE. I think, we still need to have a CBD presence. And where we see is kind of maybe some interest and some evaluation of something that's kind of gaining steam around this hub and spoke type of model, which again, I feel like we've been here before. It's kind of deja vu around having a city presence and then something closer to home and the suburbs closer where people live. But we continue to have this interest of being closer to your clients and closer to the center of activity, and the younger generations prefer to be closer to the cities, but then there's until they have kids aspect. So I think there's continued to have this under evaluation. I express some of the same sentiments that Nick was talking about in terms of not really just having a knee-jerk reaction of just, sending everyone out of, Manhattan over the water somewhere else. And so it's going to be kind of a wait and see, but I think it's not going to be a wholesale shift in the long run.
And Kathy, before I jump into lightning round, which is my favorite part, do you want to add anything to that? And if not, that's totally okay.
No, I was thinking, I mean, obviously agree with both Peter and Nick, but we're funny. We're funny people. People are funny. They're just, they react to things, and there's certainly short-term needs to go to suburbs and maybe have some satellite offices where people feel a little bit more comfortable driving to the office as opposed to taking public transportation. I'm hearing about some of those right now, but it will pass. It will pass. We will behave the way we always behave, and I agree. It's demographic, right? So younger people have certain needs, like Peter said. They want to be in the city. They want to have work-life balance all in the same place. Once they have kids, they want to go out to suburbs. I mean, it's just a progression of how we grow, and I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful. It might not be soon, but we are going to be back to where we were and enjoying our lives as we did before.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to get Nick and Peter to unmute themselves. We lost Cynthia. That's why I'm not calling on her, which is the joy of Zoom. Can you imagine if one of the panelists just walked off stage in a real life panel? Well, that is what just happened here. We are going to finish things off with a lightning round and hopefully gain Cynthia back. And then we'll transition into answering some of the audience questions that have come up as we were chatting for the last 30 minutes. So lightning round, open office, a thing of the past, yes or no? And I already heard from Kathy on this, but Peter and Nick?
No.
No.
No, okay. Free address or assigned?
Free address.
Unbiased free address.
Assigned.
Oh, okay. When is the earliest you imagine bringing people back to work in New York City?
Today.
Some of our employees are already supporting clients today,
Yeah.
as they have been throughout the pandemic. But for our office, it's going to be a while.
I
So
think
for
it'll
us,
be, sorry.
June 22nd right now is the date we're seeing as the time. So next couple of weeks.
I think it'll be phased. It'll be phased approach, and slowly
Definitely.
it will come back over time, and probably sometime mid next year, full blown the way we were.
Depends how fast you do your new job that Peter gave you 5
Yes.
minutes ago. Will your portfolio grow or shrink as a result of the pandemic?
Shrink.
Stay flat. I think there's going to be a natural de-densification taking place. But I think we'll be pretty flat. There'll be some growth, some contraction, but it'll be flat.
I agree.
With Kathy or with Peter?
Peter.
Okay, this is like my dad growing up. He would say yes or no to non-yes or no questions. So that's my favorite now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will your, oh, sorry, and then my last question, Mets or Yankees whenever we get baseball back? And there is a right and a wrong answer to this question.
Don't kill me, but Yankees.
Oh. Nick, Peter's just staying quiet.
I'll go with the World Series champions, the Washington Nationals.
On that note, Yankees.
Oh man. Okay, so on that note, we are going to transition to Q&A. Keep your questions coming in the chat, and if anyone wants to ask a question, you can just pop your name up in the chat and feel free to take yourself off mute if I call on you. I am going to hit some of the questions that came up while we were talking though, just to get us started. So how does and unfortunately, this is a great question for Cynthia. So if no one wants to take this, we may put it at the back of the list and revisit it. How does this new normal change the way that we design and utilize amenity spaces? Great question. I think there was a lot of discussion around how there's going to be an emphasis on shared amenities and an emphasis on collaboration spaces. Does this change the way that we've previously approached the design and construction of those?
I'll take the first stab. I don't think there will be a wholesale shift in how we design the amenity space. However, I think one design change that will be here to stay is touchless everything. We are making retrofits to make everything as touchless as possible. And it's just amazing when we were going through the playbook of just how much stuff we touch. And it's almost like in the old gas stations back in the day with like the perpetual paper towel to clean your hands. So that will be the one thing. If anyone can come up with a touchless coffee machine, send me a note.
Actually, we're looking at one of those in the next week, believe it or not.
Send me the details, Nick. I'm interested.
I agree. I think the acceleration of the technology is another one that has been sort of broken the barrier, I think, with this pandemic. And certainly the voice-activated way of, moving around will be much faster coming to the market than we ever expected.
Cynthia, welcome back. I want to make sure you have a chance to answer this question because I think it was.
She was just trying to
actually
avoid the lightning round.
I know, right? She claimed she had a power outage. So the question, Cynthia, was how does this new normal change the way we design and utilize amenity spaces? And I was just mentioning that I think a resounding response kind of to many of the questions that we ended up covering together was about how there will be a new emphasis on collaboration, spaces, and different types of shared amenities. Do you have a lens in your role overseeing design and construction of how that may adapt?
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm hearing from everyone now is a focus more on more collaboration, because to everyone's point, if you need to do hands down work, maybe you do work from home that day. So I think people will be expecting flexibility, and we've always had that in our workplace, and we continue to evolve as client and business needs change. And I think we'll see more of that.
All right, awesome. Nick, I just PM'd you. Someone's asking for the coffee machine info if you want to plug that in the chat. Next question was, it was reported today that Related is going to market the Neiman Marcus spaces for office use. Did you want to comment on that at all, Nick? You're chuckling. If that's a quick lightning round answer, great. And otherwise we can pass on that.
We can pass on that.
Okay, cool. Elephant in the room. In the planning process, what is the discussion that you are all seeing around this as it relates to planning and preparing for a round 2 of the virus that may come back in the fall? Are you guys sort of bracing for that? Is there any consideration being made for that being a potential reality?
So I can tell you for us operationally, you know, all the protocols we have in place now, even if we scale back, we would be prepared to re-implement. So that's, you know, so for us, it's about making sure that our stockpile of material is adequate to support, you know, months into the future, as well as our equipment. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, you know, while we prepare for this event, I think it's a safe bet that there will be some other type of event. Historically, we've had a variety of them. So, you know, we take these and be better prepared for the next time. So whether it's 6 months from now or, you know, 6 weeks.
We're also just doing a very cautious re-entry. We've already said we won't come back until September 8th, and we're going to do more like 10 to 15% and just see how it goes this fall. We're going to be cautious, and it's not mandatory either.
At Novartis, we're opening the campus July 7th. 25% is coming back if we're going to manage to that. We are prepared. We had all this time to prepare for re-entry, and if a new pandemic or new spike comes in, we just lock down again. And we're following the local government authorities and their guidance 100%. So with Novartis, the employees really have the choice to come back or not. They're actually encouraged. We're encouraging employees not to come back if you are able to work from home over the next months, and then see what happens. I think we're gonna kind of just react to whatever happens, but we're prepared for it. So now we know working from home works, and we'll just continue to do that.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of things said here. We're evaluating county by county. We've got a dashboard actually where I can track for the Americas everything at a county-wide level it's actually open for clients and the public to take a look at that dashboard, which feeds in publicly available information, obviously. But we are opening really office by office for around the 200 or so offices in the U.S. And based on meeting the series of criteria, then we can authorize them to reopen. None of our offices in the U.S. are currently open, even though I'm sitting in one. But it is part of our playbook in case there is some sort of resurgence, either at the building level or our tenant space level, what our plan and action plan will be.
Great. And Peter, I just threw your guys's link in the chat. So anyone that wants to look at that CBRE aggregated data. I'm actually going to call on Marla if you are still here. Marla, are you still with us? You can unmute yourself. Okay. So Marla asked a really, oh, there you are. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question just in case you want to build on what you put in the chat?
Sure. I was wondering, as we look towards the physical workplace evolving post COVID-19, what do we think with the workplace, the work from home being so acceptable? What will the physical environment need to support? I know obviously we're talking about collaboration and the need for human socialization, but in what ways do you see that evolving in the physical environment?
So at Novartis, we are now looking at our current spaces and sort of drawing circles around each desk and making sure 6-foot distancing is applied. We are providing hygiene stations on each floor in each area. And our focus is not to change the workplace, but to really focus on teaching behavior. And we have 5 golden rules, and they're pretty much the same as everybody's familiar with, you know, social distancing 6 feet apart, wash your hands, clean the surfaces, don't come to work if you're sick. And those are the behaviors that we are going to instill in the people that do come back to the office, because I truly believe that we are underestimating how many people want to come back and work from the office. So we just, at least for now, it's not mandated that you wear a mask, but you certainly can if you're more comfortable, or if you cannot keep the 6-foot distancing, then you should wear a mask. So those are the kind of things that we are focusing on, and we're not out there changing our workplace right now.
Thank you. Kathy, once the vaccine is created and
By
widely
Kathy.
distributed by Kathy, by you, yes.
Don't call me.
I guess what I'm looking for is in that later phase, right?
Yep.
How I think work from home is going to have a severe impact on what's the driver behind why people want to come in, and how do the spaces need to support that? And that's what I was trying to get some more insight on from everyone on the panel as to how do you see that, because I do believe it will impact the way we design workplace.
Yeah, I
agree.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Oh, sorry. I agree, though. I think that you may see a shift to more kind of different types of meeting spaces and less individual workspace. I mean, who knows? But in the next 10 to 20 years, you may see less desking, benching of any kind, and more meeting space, because that's going to be the emphasis of why you come into the office. It could be.
Yeah, the reason when in the lightning round, I said that we are going to continue to shrink our portfolio. Now, not significantly, but we certainly have some additional opportunities there, because we've been very conservative, even with the activity-based, unassigned desk type of workplace. The reason for that is because more and more people will choose to work from home certain days of the week, right? Which in the past, they really didn't feel very comfortable doing. There's a lot of management sort of unwritten rules that people felt that if they work from home, they're not going to be perceived as good workers. So I think now that it's more acceptable, and we did a lot of utilization measurements prior to pandemic, and we found out that that the utilization was pretty low already. And I think that utilization is going to drop even further. Doesn't mean that people are not going to be coming back to work. And I think they're going to need same flexibilities to have heads down spaces, collaborative spaces, conference rooms. So after we go sort of back to new normal, after the vaccine, I think people are going to begin to behave pretty much the same way they did in the past. And I don't see a huge difference in design of the workplace. It's just giving people more flexibility to use the space as they need it in the different settings. That's what I envision, the activity-based work concepts.
Awesome. Well, I am going to use this opportunity to bring this to a close. A huge thank you again to Nick, Peter, Kathy, and Cynthia. You guys were an awesome panel. Really appreciate it. And a big thank you to I think we were up to 107 people there at our peak. Thank you all for joining us. Next Wednesday at the 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we will be having another plugged in event. So please feel free to head onto the website and sign up for that. And have a good rest of the afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Thank you.